Coming up on today's edition of Locked On Eagles, the Eagles are heading to Cleveland tonight to take on the Browns and join practices on Thursday and Friday. The preseason games on Sunday. We'll preview it all on today's edition of your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, Locked On Eagles.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome in, Eagles fans, to a Wednesday edition of the show. I'm Louis DiBiase. He's Gino Camilleri. You can find the podcast Monday through Friday on all podcast platforms and on YouTube as well. Hit us up on Twitter at Locked On Birds, at DiBiase LOE, and at GC24_football. Gino, we've got joint practices tomorrow and Friday, and honestly, I'm more excited for those than the game on Sunday at 1 o'clock, which, by the way, I'll be at in Cleveland, maybe to watch Carson Strong. Not sure what I should expect in that game, but, you know, joint practices over the years, man, they've kind of taken over for these preseason games. I'd imagine you see more starters for the Eagles heavily feature these next 2 days and probably resting on Sunday, especially after their performance against the Jets.
This seems to be the week that those joint practices tend to kick off. They've been going on all around the league. I saw Pat McAfee today was at the Lions and Colts practice. So this is just another step into the future evolution of what training camps really will become. Will we ever see 3 consecutive weeks of joint practices? I don't know about that, but these 2 are going to be huge, and especially because you're going against a team in Cleveland who, you look at their defense, it will be a fantastic matchup for the weapons on offense. You look at next week against Miami, switch it around. That'll be an even better test for the defense going against Tyreek Hill, going against Jalen Waddle. So this is hands-on experience. The first time they're going against a defending team, a team that's not their own. And you're right. I'm more excited for Thursday and Friday than I am about the game on Sunday. But Lou, how can you not be happy to have football back on a Sunday, 1 p.m. kickoff? It'll really get you back in the swing of things.
That's the thing.
A couple weeks out for the regular season kickoff.
I was so juiced up for it, and I live in Buffalo, New York still. Philly in a few months, by the way, so that's going to be exciting. But I'm like, it's a 3-hour drive to Cleveland. You know, I don't think I'm going to see anybody super exciting, but I love watching the second and third team as well. I'm like, I'll make a nice day drive and go to a Sunday game at 1 to really feel the pregame vibes. We got college football as well coming up in a few weeks here as well. And we've got the kickoff with the Eagles and Lions coming up under a month away now. So it's coming. And we got joint practices, as we said, Thursday and Friday. And, Gino, again, they're more important too, because what I like about joint practices, you can control the environment more, which is interesting. You know, with the preseason, it's very vanilla. You know, you're at mercy of how the game goes with these drives. What I'm excited for is the test that Jalen Hurts, the offense, is going to have, like red zone drills against the Browns defense, you know, 2-minute drill situations. And they can control more things. One-on-one matchups are fun to see where your corners are at against Amari Cooper, who used to be the Eagle killer. It's crazy that we're not scared of him anymore, considering you have Darius Slay and James Bradbury. But I think it's just more of the controlled environments you have with the joint practices that make it more interesting and worthwhile more to maximize the talent on both sides of the ball and really see where these teams are at.
They're run much like a normal practices where you see a lot of the first team offense going against the first team defense. I don't think you're going to see many times when Coyote Awosika is out there defending Myles Garrett. No, you're going to see Lane Johnson. You're going to see Jordan Mailata. In one-on-ones, you're going to see Amari Cooper, Donovan Peoples-Jones going against Slay.
Now, in the preseason where one team could be playing first teams. I just threw the Built Bar box down.
And Matt Ryan played till, almost the second quarter.
And he's playing backups the whole time. What are you supposed to take away from that outside of bad things?
You can't really take away much from that unless they execute at nearly a flawless percent. Yeah, the outing of what Jalen Hurts did the other day was great, but it was a single drive. Let's see what he can do in one-on-one situations, when they go into 7-on-7s, when they react in 11-on-11s, where it's much more live. We'll see them probably blow plays dead quicker because they don't want the quarterback hit. So that's going to say, can you be decisive? can you maintain structure in the offense? And doing it against the Cleveland Browns, they have a pretty good defense, Lou. I'm excited for
Really
the test
good.
that the line is going to go against. You have the linebackers that they have that are all athletic. I mean, Owusu Koromoa is there. He's going to be all over the field going against them, going against the tight ends. Then you have, I believe, one of the better secondaries in football. The safeties are Grant Delpit, Johnny Johnson III. Their trio of corners right now is Greg Newsome. You got Denzel Ward, and I forget about him half the time. Greedy Williams is one of the better slot receivers in football right now. So all of the skill position players are going to have a test going into Thursday and Friday.
And Gino, that's what I want to get into coming up next with you. I think, as you nailed it, next week with Miami, I'm more excited to watch Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle against Darius Slay and James Bradbury. And we'll talk a lot of Tua and Hurts, I'm sure, with that Alabama connection next week. But overall, this is the week I'm more excited for the offense because they're coming off a flawless performance with the first team, that is, against the New York Jets on Friday. And you heard on and off reports about how they looked in camp against the Eagles defense throughout the summer. So this is a great second test against, as you said, a step up when it comes to defensive talent from the Jets to the Browns. Normally in history, growing up, that doesn't sound like a big difference, but nowadays you have to change your mindset with the Cleveland Browns. They're loaded on both sides of the ball. So it's a great test that we'll get into coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. But guys, first, a shout out to one of our sponsors of the day, and it's Elias Digital Solutions. It's almost the start of NFL season. As we talked about, we love this time of year. Heck, I'm driving 3 hours into Cleveland just to watch a preseason game with backups. And if you're into sports betting or fantasy, you need a competitive edge to win. That's why I highly recommend the Elias Game Plan app. It's the ultimate sports betting and fantasy companion for the NFL, NBA, and MLB. It's the only sports app from the most trusted name in sports stats, Elias Sports Bureau, the official statistician of U.S. pro sports leagues, including the NFL. Their app lets you access team and player stats, head-to-head team comparisons, and Elias insights from the Elias Sports Bureau research team. This app really is your one-stop source for player news and league-validated player stats, team records, expert game analysis for betting, building your fantasy team, and pressing friends. Perfect for the preseason. You get player previews to help you draft a winning fantasy team and team previews so you know what to expect as the regular season kicks off. Take my advice, download the Elias Game Plan app today with new features available all the time. Take your game to the next level. NFL season is right around the corner, so don't wait. Find the Elias Game Plan app in the App Store or the Play Store today. All right, Gino, this is Locked On Eagles. We're continuing this Wednesday edition of the show. I'm Louis DiBiase. Follow us on Twitter. He's at GC24_football. I'm at DiBiase LOE, and we're on Twitter with our show page at Locked On Birds. And, Gino, I want to get into more talk about this joint practice coming up Thursday and Friday between the Eagles and the Browns. And I really like what you mentioned in the previous segment about how next week is going to be more about, I think, the Eagles defense against the Dolphins offense. Not that the Dolphins defense isn't talented. They have a lot of talent too to test Jalen Hurts, but this is like the first big, I shouldn't say the first big test because the Eagles defense has been a massive test all summer, but to go up against another defense. And Jeff Lloyd of Locked On Browns joined me on the show yesterday. He made this great point. Different tendencies with cornerbacks, with pass rush, different looks schematically too. Although the Eagles are very multiple right now, throwing everything at Jalen. So that's going to prepare him well. It's another unit to take a look at. And it's a much better one than the one he saw against the Jets. That was a great start. He was, I think, literally perfect in that first drive. 6 for 6, 80 yards and a touchdown. But as you mentioned, the secondary's loaded. The linebackers are good with the Browns. They have 2 stud edge rushers, good defensive tackles. I mean, this is a huge test. And with Hurts last year, his numbers passing weren't great against defenses that were top 10 in DVOA in yards allowed. So this is a big test.
I look at what the Browns present and exactly what you said. It's going to be a test for not just a single drive, but in volume, in bunches, to get all of those components, the game plan element, the execution, putting in the motions in the offense, getting the timing, all against the defense that doesn't really know tendencies as much as your offense does, or as your current defense does. Because this far into camp, you've run a lot of the same plays over and over again. Those guys are going against the same players in one-on-one. They're really starting to learn who they are inside and out, which any great game planner should do. But when you're going into these joint practices, can you execute what you have put into place? Do I think they throw the whole kitchen sink at Cleveland? And do I think they do that this Sunday as well? No, they have to keep it close to the chest. But you're going to see a lot of those same things. You're going to see them attempt passes over the middle. I think you're going to look at the areas where Jalen was deficient in last year. Continue to see if he can do that. I saw, I believe it was Martin Frank tweeted out that Jalen Hurts was rolling to his left the other day in practice and fired a bullet to DeVonta Smith. It's little things like that. The tendencies that he didn't do last year, can we continue to see him improve against the defense that doesn't know what is going to happen? And if they do look better than him and you see a lot of those issues, if he throws a couple interceptions, if he's late on the timing, well, then one, I don't think it's an end-all be-all, but it's a great lesson to have. But is also going perfect a good lesson as well? Absolutely. So these joint practices, what you can take out of it is what you can get better in these next couple weeks till the regular season starts. Because once it is guns a-blazing against Detroit, you're not going to have a single series. You're not going to have multiple joint practices. You're going in there with what you did Monday through Saturday to see if you can execute. So now is the time to figure out what works in practices to carry over to a game, especially against the Cleveland defense that is talented. Sure.
And I think what I like too about these joint practices versus the preseason is Jalen's not going to be able to rely on his legs. Of course, you want him to in these games, but we're going to get a good look at, to where he is passing right now. Jalen Hurts, apparently Gino's been hot the last 2 weeks, and that carried over into the game on Friday, but it hasn't just been the game. As you mentioned, reporters were noticing he was doing things that he didn't do a lot last year, utilizing the middle of the field, throwing across his body, rolling to his left. The touchdown to Dallas Goedert was along the left sidelines last week. I mean, these are great signs, but again, you get used to the same defense, even if the Eagles are one of the most multiple defenses in the NFL this year, throwing the kitchen sink at you. That is your defense. We heard that Jalen Hurts meets with Jonathan Gannon every week to go over things. So he's going to, eventually pick up on certain tendencies of Darius Slay over the last 3 years, right? So we're going to really see where he's at with processing, with accuracy, timing throws, layer throws over the middle to his left. All of that, we're going to really get a good test with Cleveland. And just, again, the personnel. We'll see where, Denzel Ward is at with his injury. I'm not sure if he's going to be participating in these, but as you mentioned, Greg Newsome, Greedy Williams, it's a loaded defense. The Browns were last year 5th in yards allowed. They allowed the 5th fewest yards total in the NFL, and they had the 11th highest DVOA. They were also 2nd in lowest yards per play. So, Gino, this is a really good test. And I mean, we didn't even mention in this segment, at least, the pass rushers, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah on the second level, covering Dallas Goedert maybe. It's going to be a star-studded matchup. And that's the awesome thing, though, is you feel like the Eagles this year, we don't know with Jalen yet, but you feel like their personnel can hang. I watched the playoffs a lot last year after the Eagles got knocked out, and I'm like, I don't know if the Eagles have the horses yet to get into this race. Now I feel like they can go up against a Cleveland defense and do just as well.
Well, I will say one thing going into this. I believe that Jalen Hurts can outduel Cleveland quarterback number 4 with the weapons that he has. And that's what I will address him as. I will not use his government name.
Yeah,
I do not respect
that's fine.
Cleveland quarterback number 4. Our quarterback, our QB1, Jalen Hurts has all the pieces. Like you said, Lou, I'm going into this thinking our horses can outrun your horses. A.J. Brown can outduel Denzel Ward. DeVonta Smith can outduel Greg Newsome. Dallas Goedert can outduel Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. I believe Mailata and Lane Johnson will be the most difficult test that Myles Garrett maybe sees all season long. This isn't an event in my eyes. This is one where if you're just going to a camp, like a Nike camp or an Adidas camp, and you want to show up to the drills that are going to pop, it's going to be the one-on-ones on the offensive and defensive line, and it's going to be the one-on-ones when they're throwing routes on air with the cornerbacks and the wide receivers. Both of these teams, and especially you look at the tree, look who is picking players now for Cleveland, being Andrew Berry, being a part of the Howie Roseman tree. They've invested in offensive line. They've invested in defensive line. They've gotten better at cornerback.
Isn't it weird having the Cleveland Browns being competent? It's in the Buffalo Bills. It's like, well, how old am I?
And you're starting to see other teams. I mean, the New York Jets that we talked about last week with Joe Douglas, the direction he's getting that team in is going to look better. I believe that Brian Daboll will do good things in New York. The parity in the league.
Like give Tyrod Taylor first team reps.
Yeah, I believe the parity is becoming smaller and smaller year over year, especially in the NFC.
For sure.
And this is a good test because you're not going to see Cleveland this year. But you know what it's going to take to compete against a roster that has built to compete with the rest of the AFC. And much like you're going to do with Miami next week. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. The Browns have their work cut out for them this year, especially if they lose quarterback number 4 for the majority of the year, which hopefully they do. That's the one, I said this to Jeff yesterday. That's the one, crappy part of this, Gino, is that you love that the Cleveland Browns and the Buffalo Bills and these small market teams that have suffered for so long are bouncing back. They suffered for so long. And the fact that you're a Browns fan and a lot of them that have a soul at least can't enjoy this. That definitely does stink. But for the Eagles, though, regardless, the test is the test on the field this week, and it's a great one. We want to see Jalen Hurts, continue his hot streak over the last few weeks. Because, again, last year, he just wasn't great against teams with a top 10 DVOA. And when it comes to yards allowed last year, he averaged against those kind of defenses. So there were 6 matchups. It was against the 49ers, Cowboys, Panthers, Buccaneers, Broncos, and Saints. All those teams did meet that criteria. Hurts averaged 192 yards passing in those games, a 57% completion percentage, just 3 touchdowns in 6 games passing, and 3 interceptions. So there were games where he completed just 48%, 54, 52. He's a different player now. He's got A.J. Brown, a second-year DeVonta Smith, still that loaded offensive line. Hopefully that is in the past. We'll find out, though, Gino, on Thursday and Friday. So super exciting stuff.
All the things you just said, Lou, I believe you will find answers in over the next couple weeks because you're going to throw in volume. They're frankly not going to run the ball a lot in this game when Jalen Hurts is in. We know that this offensive line is good. We know that the running backs are good. We know that Jalen Hurts can run the ball. But what do we want to see? We want to see him throw in volume. And a lot of those outings, even the Denver one, which was probably his best of the bunch, he didn't surpass 200 yards. He didn't have to throw in volume. A lot of it went to the running game. Mm-hmm. But now, in this league where we know you can't let off the gas at all, even with 13 seconds left in the game, when you're going against Pat Mahomes. Lou, am I wrong, though?
No, and that's why when I was watching the playoffs, I'm like, we are not here yet. This is a different league. Yeah.
You hope in this outing, Cleveland, who knows and has changed their direction on it because they were in a situation much like Philadelphia last year where they relied on the run. They went out and got a guy who they believe can pass the ball better. Well, let's see who can do it. Let's see if they can throw. Jalen Hurts, can you throw in volume? That's going to be the question to me, Lou. The first time they have to throw from behind and he has to catch up, that will be the real test. That will be, did you study Monday through Saturday, the last 52 weeks, the last year, the 52 weeks the year before that, and put it all together in those moments. These next 2 weeks against offenses that are building to the modern generation, how do your horses line up? It should be a good indicator of what could happen come the regular season.
Yeah, because some teams are, if they don't have that and their guy doesn't become that, aka Baker Mayfield, some organizations are willing to literally sell their soul for that. So, yeah, it's a step that every team is requiring, and we'll see if Jalen Hurts can step up to that. That's going to be the question. It's been that for the last 2 years, and that'll continue throughout the 2022 season. Gino, coming up next, before we wrap up the show, I want to keep talking about this Browns offense and defense, the roster overall. We're going to play a fun game before we wrap up. If you could take one Browns player for this Eagles team for 2022, who would it be? We'll get into that coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles.
And if you want to get in on the action this Sunday, I'm going to give you one hint. Don't tweet out that you got a winner on a bet before the game is over. And you know where you
Who would do such a thing?
Who would do such a thing? Not my co-host, Lou, because when you are betting at betonline.net, you do it with all of the information from Elias Sports Bureau. You take it and you couple it with the unbelievable amount of information that betonline.net gives you. They give you all the player props, any league you want to bet on, any game you can bet on. Preseason football, folks, this time of the year is the best. Sooner or later, college football's coming back. The regular season will be back, and you get in on the action at the official sportsbook of the entire Locked On Podcast Network and the Locked On Eagles podcast. We'll be back with 3 picks each and every week with our LOE3 segment powered by betonline.net. If you want to get in on the action, get in where the game starts, where Lou and I are putting in our wagers, pick up your mobile device today, head on your laptop to betonline.net because that's where the game starts.
Thanks again for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome in, Eagles fans, to a Wednesday edition of the podcast. We're getting you ready for the Eagles joint practice with the Cleveland Browns Thursday and Friday, and then the game in the preseason week 2 is Sunday at 1 o'clock in downtown Cleveland. Guys, to shout out one of our other network shows that you need to add is the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast. I just had my draft on Saturday. I use the advice of Vinny Liar. You can find the podcast on all platforms, Locked On Fantasy Football. Also, we have our Locked On Dynasty show available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. I'm in a Dynasty league this year for the first time, so I'm getting used to that. So Vinny's got my back. He's got yours as well. Find it wherever you get your shows. Gino, before we wrap up this edition of Locked On Eagles, though, we were talking about just how great of a test this is going to be for the Eagles going up against the Browns. We mostly highlighted Jalen Hurts and the Eagles offense going up against the Browns defense. But as you mentioned, too, this team, although they did it in such a scummy way, once quarterback number 4 in Cleveland does play, unfortunately, they're going to be good. On the field, they're going to be good. He is a top quarterback in the NFL at his age, the last time he played at least. They have Amari Cooper. I think Donovan Peoples-Jones is one of the most underrated deep targets, maybe in that Quez Watkins tier, right? Mm-hmm. And 2 stud running backs, Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. So it's going to be a great test to see how good this Eagles defense truly is as well. They're going to have maybe even tougher test too going up against this unit. So it's a great roster. When it comes to, if you could steal one for the Eagles, and maybe there's a couple obvious ones, but we'll get a little deeper into this too. Like who's somebody on the Browns that you said or say now you would love to be on this roster for the Eagles?
I mean, I'm not going to cheat and say Myles Garrett.
Right. Yes. Thank you for playing the game correctly.
I would go with a Philly kid, somebody who I believed was going to sign here his last time as a free agent, Johnny Johnson III. You talk about a position that we still
they made a play for him, I believe.
Yeah, he was in the equation. I believe that the Browns gave him more money, better opportunity there, which is crazy now because he would most likely start here in Philadelphia.
Did you know they're trying, man? They're trying for you. They tried to get Marcus Williams this year. They're gunning for you because right now it looks brutal.
Ugo Amadi, I'll take for the moment. It's like one of the. It's just a taste. It's like
they're like, we can't get a good safety for Gino. Throw him a duck. Just get him something.
Hey, I mean, he was the starting nickel safety for the Seahawks last 2 years. He's a special teams ace, but is he a starter to the level of Johnny Johnson? I don't believe anybody on this roster is. Johnny Johnson has played at a high caliber level for now 2 organizations. He was with the Rams, an instrumental part of that defense for them. Grant Delpit, I would say, is a close second at that position. Then you would throw in either Denzel Ward or Greg Newsome, I would say. But Johnny Johnson, bring home a Philly kid like they did with Hassan Riddick, plays the position I love the most, and is fearless. That guy will go over the middle. He'll go up and go into a 50-50 catch situation, get the ball, come down with it, or he'll just take your head off across the middle. So he's going to be a fun one to watch going up against these running backs and these tight ends in one-on-one drills.
Yeah, Gino, I agree. And now that Jaquiski Tartt, I mean, he's still running with the third team. I don't know. I still think he's going to end up making the roster, but maybe not, though. Again, it's not nearly the lock we thought it was when they signed him in June. Now that Tartt isn't what he seemed, and Kavon Wallace doesn't sound like he took the step that we were maybe hoping for with this opportunity, safety looks even worse. I mean, it's not going to kill you because of how good this defense is outside of this position, but I'm with you. If you could have stole Johnny Johnson or, even Grant Delpit, that would have been huge. I love Greg Newsome, though, too. Mm-hmm. And I know he was just, there's some players in drafts where you're like, I would love him, and I know the Eagles aren't going to get him because they're either picking too high or too low. They're not in the middle where you don't want to reach. Like Christian Watson was that for me in the last draft. I was like, there's going to be other better receivers available when the Eagles are up, and he's not going to be there in the second round. That was Greg Newsome, I felt like, a couple years ago when they took DeVonta Smith. And he was really good in his rookie year. Mm-hmm. Last year, he had the 5th best graded single coverage grade, I should say, from PFF among all corners. It was Jalen Ramsey, J.C. Jackson, Denzel Ward was 3. So the Browns have 2 corners here in that tier. A.J. Terrell and then Greg Newsome. Newsome would be great. And, of course, the Eagles are set right now at corner. But long-term, Gino, they're still not. Darius Slay, in his 30s now. James Bradbury pushing 30s on only a 1-year deal. So long-term, they still need that guy. And they haven't found him in the draft yet. Newsome would be that dude. So I'm with you. I think it's got to be one of, as much as I love Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, I don't regret what the Eagles did anymore with Landon Dickerson because he's a stud, and they look good at linebacker now. So I'd say it's probably got to be a defensive back.
That's the two positions I was going with. And Newsome, when we were talking about him last year during the draft, the exact position and role we wanted him to play is still currently available.
Yeah.
That number, surefire, I'll say surefire, Zach McPherson, I believe he can develop, and I think the team believes he can develop into being that player. But talk about a guy who showed it all in college, has all the traits, has the length, has the physical toughness to play corner in the NFL at the number 2 position, who could eventually potentially develop into a number 1. Greg Newsome had everything and more that we were talking about. And you said it. You have 2 of the better cover corners, one-on-one corners in this league on the field going against your offense this Thursday and Friday. Talking about iron sharpening
what
iron.
A battle.
It's going to really be fun, and I wish we could see it live.
I know.
Unfortunately, we're going to have to read it through tweets, and it should be fun. I'm glad you get to experience it come Sunday. Even if it's 2-3 drives with the starters, it'll be great action back and forth between them.
A.J. Brown and DeVonta Smith really can't catch a break this summer, man. They got to play Slay and Bradbury all summer, and now here, go take on 2 of the best single coverage corners
to beat
in the
the
NFL
best,
West.
you got to beat the best, man. That's
Absolutely.
how it's going to be.
No, for sure. I'll never take Jadeveon Clowney though, Gino. So Clowney can stay in Cleveland for sure. But it's going to be a great test. We'll keep you covered right here on Locked On Eagles Thursday and Friday, and after the game on Sunday. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast on all platforms for a show Monday through Friday. Available all podcast platforms and on YouTube as well. Make sure you hit us up on Twitter. We'll be following along during the practices at Locked On Birds, at DiBiase LOE, and at GC24_football. Thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Make sure your second listen is the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. As I mentioned, get ready for your fantasy drafts. For you smart people that wait till later on in the summer to avoid injuries, subscribe to the Fantasy Football Podcast, Locked On Fantasy Football with Vinny Liar on all platforms. For Gino Camilleri, I'm Lou DiBiase signing off. As always, thank you for downloading. Thank you for watching and listening. And let's go Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.